by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to special coverage of President Biden's speech to the nation from the Oval Office. The president will tout the bipartisan agreement to suspend the debt ceiling, averting a potential economic disaster. For those of you expecting the news hour, we'll join the program following the speech. For others, stations will return you to regular PBS programming at the conclusion of the president's remarks.
The agreement suspends the debt ceiling for 2 years, and the president is expected to sign it tomorrow, just days before the U.S. would have run out of money to pay its bills. Let's go briefly to Laura Barone-Lopez at the White House. Laura, what are we expecting to hear from President Biden just minutes from now?
The president is going to take a victory lap, Jeff. He's going to talk about his role in averting this crisis, what was at stake, and he'll also talk about the fact that he was able to bring people together. We know that the president likes to talk about how he has worked repeatedly in a bipartisan fashion with Republicans, and even in the face of a potential default, he was able to work with them as well. One other thing he's going to highlight, Jeff, is he's going to talk about what didn't Medicaid.
That's Laura Barone-Lopez at the White House. And in just a moment, we will be joining President Biden addressing the nation live from the Oval Office. Now to the president.
My fellow Americans, when I ran for president, I was told the days of bipartisanship were over and that Democrats and Republicans can no longer work together. But I refuse to believe that because America can never give in to that way of thinking. Look, the only way American democracy can function is through compromise and consensus. And that's what I work to do as your president. You know, to forge bipartisan agreement where it's possible and where it's needed. I've signed more than 350 bipartisan laws thus far in just 2.5 years, including an historic law that rebuilding America so that we can rank #1 in the world in infrastructure instead of where we rank now number 13 in the world. Another historic law, rebuilding our manufacturing base so that we'll lead the world once again in making semiconductor chips so much more and so many more sophisticated ones. And now a bipartisan budget agreement. This is vital because it's essential to the progress we made over the last few years is keeping full faith and credit of the United States of America and passing a budget that continues to grow our economy and reflects our values as a nation. That's why I'm speaking to you tonight, to report on the crisis averted and what we're doing to protect America's future. Passing this budget agreement was critical. The stakes could not have been higher. If we had failed to reach an agreement on the budget, there were extreme voices threatening to take America for the first time in our 247-year history into default on our national debt. Nothing would have been more irresponsible. Nothing would have been more catastrophic. Our economy would have been thrown into recession. Retirement accounts for millions of Americans would have been decimated. 8 million Americans would have lost their jobs. Default would have destroyed our nation's credit rating, which would have made everything from mortgages to car loans to funding for the government much more expensive. And it would have taken years to climb out of that hole. And America's standing as the most trusted, reliable financial partner in the world would have been shattered. So it was critical to reach an agreement. And it's very good news for the American people. No one got everything they wanted, but the American people got what they needed. We averted an economic crisis, an economic collapse. We're cutting spending and bringing the deficits down at the same time. We're protecting important priorities from Social Security to Medicare to Medicaid to veterans to our transformational investments in infrastructure and clean energy. I want to commend Speaker McCarthy. You know, he and I, we and our teams, we were able to get along, get things done. We were straightforward with one another, completely honest with one another, respectful with one another. Both sides operated in good faith. Both sides kept their word. And I also want to commend other congressional leaders. House Minority Leader Jeffries, Senate Majority Leader Schumer, Senate Minority Leader McConnell. They acted responsibly and put the good of the country ahead of politics. The final vote in both chambers was overwhelming, far more bipartisan than anyone thought was possible. So I want to thank the members of Congress who voted to pass this agreement, which I'm going to sign tomorrow and become the law. So here's what the deal does. First, it cuts spending. And over the next 10 years, the deficit will be cut by more than $1 trillion. That will be on top of the record $1.7 trillion I already cut the deficit in my first 2 years in office. And it's clear we're all on a much more fiscally responsible course than the one I inherited when I took office 4 years ago. When I came to office, the deficit had increased every year the previous 4 years. And nearly $8 trillion was added to the national debt in the last administration. And now we're turning things around. And that's good for America. You know, my dad used to have an expression. He said, Joey, don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget. I'll tell you what you value. That's at the heart of this debate. What do we value? Protecting seniors. You may remember during my State of the Union address, there was a spirit exchange between me and a few Republicans spontaneously occurring on the floor of the House of Representatives. I was pointing out that for years, some of them were putting forward proposals to cut Social Security and Medicare. And some of them that night took exception, and they said very loudly that that wasn't true. So I asked them on the floor at that night, I said, ask them a simple question. Will you agree not to cut Social Security, not to cut Medicare? Would they agree to protect these essential programs that are a lifeline for millions of Americans? Programs that these Americans have been paying into every single paycheck they've earned since they started working, and that provides so much peace of mind. With the bright lights and cameras on, those few Republicans who were protesting, they agreed. They said they wouldn't cut it. That's how we protected Social Security and Medicare from the beginning and from it being cut, period. Healthcare was another priority for me, a top priority. I made it clear from the outset, I would not agree to any cuts in Medicaid, another essential lifeline for millions of Americans, including children in poverty, the elderly in nursing homes, and Americans living with disabilities. The original House Republican proposal would have cut health care for up to 21 million Americans on Medicaid. And I said no. And Medicare is protected. And so are millions of people most in need. Look, I've long believed that the only one truly sacred obligation that the government has is to prepare those we send into harm's way and care for them and their families when they come home and when they don't come home. That's why my last budget provided VA hospitals with additional funding for more doctors, nurses, and equipment to accommodate the needs of veterans and more appointments. The House Republican plan would have meant 30 fewer million VA healthcare visits for our veterans. But we didn't let that happen. In addition, this bill fully funds the Bipartisan PACT Act, the most significant law in decades for veterans exposed to toxic burn pits and for their families. It expands access to those veterans and their families to health care and to disability benefits. Look, we're investing in America and our people and in our future. We've created over 13 million new jobs, nearly 800,000 manufacturing jobs. Where is it written that America can't lead the world again in manufacturing? Unemployment is at 3.7%. More Americans are working today than ever in the history of this country. And inflation has dropped 10 straight months in a row. In this debate, I refuse to put what was responsible for all this economic progress on the chopping block. This bipartisan agreement protects the law that will help us build the best infrastructure in the world. It fully protects the CHIPS and Science Act, which is going to bring key parts of our supply chain to America, so we don't have to rely on others, like semiconductors, those tiny computer chips smaller than the tip of your finger that affect nearly everything we rely on, from cell phones to building automobiles to the most sophisticated weapon systems and so much more. We protected another law that I passed and signed last year that finally beat Big Pharma, which I've been trying to do for over 30 years. It finally gives Medicare the power to negotiate lower drug prices, just like the VA has been able to do for veterans. This law has already dramatically cut the cost of insulin for seniors, from as much as $400 a month to just $35 a month for insulin. Negotiating lower drug prices not only saves seniors a lot of money, it saves the country a lot of money. $160 billion that's not having to be paid out because drug prices are more rational. We pay the highest drug prices of any industrial nation in the world. And it's just the beginning. You know, we also protected the most significant breakthrough ever in dealing with the existential threat of climate change. Today, new wind and solar power is cheaper than fossil fuel. Since I've been in office, clean energy and advanced manufacturing have brought in $470 billion in private investments. It's going to create thousands of jobs, good paying jobs, all across this country, and help the environment at the same time. Remember, at the beginning of this debate, some of my Republican colleagues were determined to gut the clean energy investments. I said, no, we kept them all. And there's so much more to do. We're going to do even more to reduce the deficit. We need to control spending if we're going to do that. But we also have to raise revenue and go after tax cheats and make sure everybody's paying their fair share. No one, I promise, no one making less than $400,000 a year will pay a penny more in federal taxes. But like most of you at home, I know the federal tax system isn't fair. That's why I kept my commitment, again, that no one earning less than $400,000 a year will pay a penny more in federal taxes. That's why last year I secured more funding to go more IRS funding to go after wealthy tax cheats. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, and it is nonpartisan, says that this bill will bring in $150 billion, and other outside experts expect that it would save as much as $400 billion because it's forcing people to pay their fair share. Republicans may not like it, but I'm going to make sure the wealthy pay their fair share. I'm also proposed closing over a dozen special interest tax loopholes for big oil, crypto traders, hedge fund billionaires, saving taxpayers billions of dollars. Republicans defended every single one of these special interest loopholes, every single one. But I'm going to be coming back, and with your help, I'm going to win. Right now, catch this, right now the average billionaire in America pays just 8% in federal taxes, 8%. Teachers and firefighters pay more than that. That's why I proposed a minimum tax for billionaires. Republicans are against it, but I'm going to keep fighting for it. No billionaire should pay less in federal taxes than a teacher or a firefighter. Look, let me close with this. I know bipartisanship is hard and unity is hard, but we can never stop trying. Because in moments like this one, the ones we just faced, where the American economy and the world economy is at risk of collapsing, there's no other way. No matter how tough our politics gets, we need to see each other not as adversaries, but as fellow Americans. Treat each other with dignity and respect. To join forces as Americans to stop shouting, lower the temperature, and work together to pursue progress, secure prosperity, and keep the promise of America for everybody. As I've said in my inaugural address, without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. And we can never become that country. I can honestly say to you tonight that I've never been more optimistic about America's future. We just need to remember who we are. We are the United States of America. And there's nothing we can't do when we do it together. So thank you all for listening, taking the time tonight to listen to me. May God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
And that was President Biden addressing the nation from the Oval Office tonight with, as he put it, a report on the crisis averted, meaning a national default. He also explained what was in that debt ceiling bill. And he also sought to explain to the American people how certain provisions in the bill are aligned with his vision and his agenda for the country. Let's go back to Laura Barone Lopez at the White House. Laura, this was the first Oval Office address of the Biden presidency. Why did he and the White House, based on your reporting, see fit to use this as the occasion tonight?
The Oval Office, as you know, Jeff, is really symbolizes the center of the presidency. And as you noted, he talked about the crisis averted. And White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said earlier today that the reason he was doing this from the Oval Office was to really convey the gravity of how close the country came, but that they were able to avert this catastrophic default. And you heard him outline and go through what could have happened if the country had defaulted. Social Security benefits being cut, veterans being impacted, a potential recession. And so he really was trying to lay out the stakes here from the Oval Office.
Laura, we heard the president there also hail the leadership, of course, in both the House and the Senate, and in particular, hail the efforts of Speaker Kevin McCarthy, calling him a straightforward negotiator, saying he was there in good faith, that the two of them could get along and they were honest with each other. That may strike a lot of people based on what we knew about their relationship really going into those negotiations, some of which those early meetings did not end on very nice endings, we should say. But can you tell us about the relationship between these two men and why you think President Biden felt it was important to mention him specifically by name there?
Heading into this entire saga, Amna, the president did not have much of a relationship with Speaker Kevin McCarthy. He's had a relationship with Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. We know that in the last 2011 fiscal cliff crisis that they hashed out the details to avert a default that time. And so going into this, there really wasn't much of a relationship. President Biden, though, is known for when he does strike bipartisan agreements, be it the infrastructure bill, be it the semiconductor one that he mentioned, that if there are key Republican allies and ones that worked with him to get across the finish line, he will give them credit. He will talk about them. He often jokes this might hurt them come campaign time, but he likes to really emphasize his bipartisan nature. It really struck me, Amna, that the very first sentence out of the president's mouth in this address talked about everyone said that bipartisanship was over, bipartisanship was dead when I ran for the presidency. But he used this moment to explain to the American people that he believes he is good at striking compromises with Republicans.
And Laura, looking at this speech through the lens of the 2024 presidential race, President Biden, of course, is president. He's also a presidential candidate. And this speech in many ways allowed the campaign to press the fact, as they see it, that he is a seasoned, competent leader, and that in these ultra-partisan times, he is someone who was able to notch this major bipartisan achievement. Does the White House see it that way, or rather does the campaign see it that way?
They do. This speech reminded me, Jeff, a bit of the 2020 campaign stump speeches, where he over and over again talked about his ability to work with Republicans. He noted that so far, he says he's signed more than 350 bipartisan bills. Another line that stood out to me was when he said, the only way American democracy can function is if it's through compromise. So again, hitting on this other note that was a part of his 2020 campaign and likely will be a part of his campaign, his reelection campaign, which is that he is trying to show that democracy can function, that good governance is potentially good politics, and that is the way to win reelection.
Laura, in the few seconds we have left, a primetime address, a 7 o'clock Eastern address like this from the Oval Office, talking not just about the debt ceiling bill, but also, of course, about many other accomplishments. Who do you think they wanted to speak to by giving this address at this moment?
We heard the president talk a lot about the economy, so they are clearly trying to reach a number of those voters, too, that are still feeling unsteady about the president. His approval rating hasn't really bounced back, and they're trying to talk to them about the fact that he is doing what is necessary for the economy.
Laura Barone Lopez at the White House for us tonight. Laura, thanks so much for that great reporting. For viewers watching this special coverage, we return you to your regular PBS station program. For those of you watching the NewsHour, we'll be right back with the rest of the program.
Alexa, what are the latest news from the Caribbean Television Network?
From Caribbean Television Network News. Even in his inability to lead, Ariel Henry enjoys the support of the United States. From Zoom Haiti News Daily. The Assistant Secretary of State for International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, Todd D. Robinson, reiterated the United States' support for the Haitian government in the fight against insecurity.
Zoom Haiti News, français. L'ex-ministre de l'Agriculture, des Ressources naturelles et du Développement rural, David Nicolas, est mort.
En Zoom Haiti News Español, el gobierno de Biden agradece la colaboración de las autoridades haitianas en la gestión del expediente de migrantes irregulares devueltos al país.
Zoom IT News et Caribbean Television Network, plus de 10 sites internet, en anglais, français, espagnol et plus d'une centaine d'autres langues. Désormais, vous n'avez plus besoin d'un ordinateur ou d'un téléphone portable. Il suffit de demander à Alexa.
Alexa, what are the latest news from the Caribbean Television Network?
From Caribbean Television Network News. From Zoom Haiti News Daily.
En Zoom Haiti News, français.
En Zoom Haiti News Español.
Caribbean Television Network, en français, anglais et espagnol. Vous pouvez aussi télécharger les applications de Zoom IT News en créole, français, anglais et espagnol. Visitez notre site internet sur www.caribbean